Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Hello and welcome to Softcover, the Print's platform for the launch of select non-fiction books. I'm Snehesh Alex Philip, and the book that we're discussing today is very interesting because it is about not just about an organization, but also about one of India's finest spy ever. Yes, I'm talking about the founder of the research and analysis wing, Rameshwar Nath Kao, or Ramaji as he was fondly called. Uh, the book that we're launching today is actually The War That Made Raw, published by Westland Publications and Golden Pen. The authors of this book are actually Anusha, Nandakumar, and Sandeep, Saket. Welcome to the print, both of you.
Thank you. We're very happy to be here.
Before we actually go ahead and talk about this book, I have this wrapped book here. Let me just unwrap it for the viewers to see, how this book looks. Well, there you go. This is The War That Made Raw, Anushka, Nandakumar, and Sandeep Saket, published by, of course, Western Publications and Golden Pen. So, first of all, congratulations to this book, for this book.
Thank you.
And before I go ahead, viewers, I must tell you that both Nandakumar as well as Sandeep are actually into the film industry. Anushka is actually an independent filmmaker. Her documentary, The Boxing Ladies, won the National Film Award in 2010. And her short films have been selected at various national and international film festivals. And Sandeep is concerned, he has been working in the Mumbai film and television industry for more than 10 years. His films have been screened at various national and international festivals. And I can tell you for the fact, of course, with your permission, but I'm letting the secret out, that both of them actually have, there's a show, a series which is coming out on Amazon. The screenplay has been written by both these individuals, and the series has been directed by, of course, Rohit Shetty. And it's supposed to be, a story which is inspired on India's biggest and, longest manhunt, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, yes, it is.
So, the first question that, of course, comes to my mind is, how did you guys manage to write this book? Are you connected to, this field? Did you have family who were working in the IP or in the RAW? Because I read this book in just 2 hours. It's about 250 odd pages. Lovely book with a lot of insights, a lot of, scoops. So how did you guys manage to write this?
So, to answer the question, we don't have any family in the armed forces. It started from being fascinated by spy thrillers, so you see so many spy thrillers happening around you. There's so much in popular culture, but in Indian popular culture, there's very little. So we started, reading up on RAW. Hoping to find some interesting story, and then and Sandeep has a history majors. So then we went into that rabbit hole where we got so many interesting stories, and then we were like, what do we do with this gold mine of information? And it was also very interesting because we would find one article somewhere which would then lead to another ex-RAW agent who has spoken about his life. So we started connecting this. It was like a little mini espionage project of our own.
And as 1970 war, as the war goes, this is one of the biggest decisive victory that has ever been. One of the biggest victories ever in the world. And Western society, as in Western countries, they are very obsessed with their First World War and the Second World War. India, as a country, we have forgotten those wars, and there have been many films also, and not many pieces as such, as in literary pieces are written on that thing. And when you start looking at the war, the first thing that you look at how those wars in West also, how they've been made possible by secret agencies. And there comes the role ki how a secret agency plays a role into success, in the success of a war. And that is where our journey began.
So what actually happened, I think, is also like we read about Raw, we read about the war, and then we kind of traced it back to the genesis of, okay, this was that point that a decision was made, and this is how it led to that decision. So it was almost like a very complex puzzle that slowly became a part of the book. And we must and we didn't know what we wanted to do with the information. So I think we work very closely with Mr. Hussain Zaidi. So he kind of encouraged us to take the route of writing a book and helped us a lot. And then when we were a little like not so sure of how we want to write it, he said, do it the way like write it like a screenplay. So that's what we tried, have a hook point, have like, this is how it started, this is how it leads into this. So it also becomes like a read that is thrilling, but not compromising on the historical aspects of it.
Also, at the same time, it's very, Mr. Hussain kind of like handled us into writing a book, because writing a book is much different. It seems, as they say, writing a book seems very exciting, very fascinating, but when you actually take a plunge into it, it's very difficult. So actually somewhere helped us a lot during this entire process.
I can tell you for the fact that this book has been really well written. As I said, it just took me 2 hours to finish off this book, and very interesting book. When we talk about, of course, you started off by saying that James Bond is the most popular spy in the world, and the fact is that when Kausar, he is actually one of India's finest spy ever. And as you rightly mentioned, the 1971 war was actually one of the finest, it was the finest movement in the Indian military history. Before we talk further on the 1971 war, I'm intrigued by Kausar. And, while you and I have read a lot about Kausar, I just want to know for our viewers itself, his exposure actually comes not because of Roy's exposure. Actually comes he shined better in the IB initially, right? What was the case that really brought Kausar in the limelight while he was just, if I'm not mistaken, he was just 36 or something, 36-year-old?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there was this conference called Bandung Conference, which was happening in 55 in Indonesia, and this was a grouping of Asian and newly independent African countries. And this conference was organized by Jawaharlal Nehru and Zhou Enlai and Indonesian Premier. And when now.
So basically, I think the most definitive, the thing that brought him into the limelight is what is famously called as the Kashmiri Princess probe, which was, a flight that took off from Hong Kong, crashed into the sea,
Indonesian
waters, and it was the pilots and the crew members were Indians, and it would have been just a one-off incident. But the Chinese Prime Minister was to be on that flight, and he didn't go on the last minute. So it was, and the Chinese Prime Minister didn't trust anybody at that time, and he wanted India to be a neutral investigator. And then it was like, who's going to do this investigation? The IB, Bholanath Malik, who was the head of IB at that time, said, okay, fine, I have this man in mind, and that was Kao. So Kao, at 36 years old, of a newly independent India, took on this task.
International probe, which involved multiple countries.
Which involved several countries.
5 countries, countries. Because the flight was made by US. It was, had Indian crew. It took off from Hong Kong, crashed into independent waters, and had Chinese passengers.
Yeah.
So it was like this kind of a mishmash that he had to navigate. And one is like a communist country, one is like colonial powers. So nobody trusted each other. And then he found out that the whole conspiracy was a Taiwanese conspiracy. So that was what got him into the limelight. And he earned so much trust and goodwill and he was then made the personal private security in charge of Jawaharlal Nehru. Then went on to do assignments in Ghana, when until finally Indira Gandhi got him on board to start RAW.
So he was, of course, very impressive during this particular probe, and he was the Chinese premier actually also gave him his own personal seal, as a mark of respect and appreciation for the job by Kao sir. Uh, you know, then of course happened the 1962 war. Then there was, of course, the 1965 war also that took place. What had happened then? Was there a feeling in the Indian establishment that we were lacking intelligence? We were not able to read the Chinese moves in 62, or for that matter in 65. Was there a thought process at that time?
Yeah, 62 when China attacked Tibet and controlled Tibet, and that time Indian intelligence was led by IB, and IB relied for foreign intelligence. They relied only on foreign agency, say somewhere from European countries and American agencies, and they did not get the intelligence about Chinese incursion on time, and they were totally taken by surprise. And they were summarily, India was summarily defeated in those, like in 21 days. Similar thing happened in 65 war when almost 30,000 Pakistani general soldiers, they came in like posing as civilians to infiltrate Kashmir and incite war from inside. That time also, they didn't come to know of any of those, how the people are coming in. When some local Kashmiris caught one of those infiltrators, then they got to know about the plan. It was called Operation Gibraltar. It was inspired from 18th century Muslim conquest of Spain.
Yeah.
And then they got to know about this plan. Then they realized that they're not only like 5-10 infiltrators, there are actually 30,000 people. And then the war started. And India started on a losing foot. But suddenly, during the course of the war, because of armies and military's tactical and strategic, planning, they won the war. But both the time, Kao had a ringside view of all the entire situation. He knew India's intelligence service is not up to the mark. They are not delivering on the promise. First promise is the safety of the country. They are not delivering on that promise. And IB at that time was primarily concerned with the internal intelligence about the internal politics of the country. They were not concerned about the external politics, the external intelligence, external activities. And that is when he realized that India needs one dedicated agency which deals specifically in external intelligence field.
And there was also this feeling that, I think a little bit more bureaucratic. They needed a body that was a little more independent, could take decisions faster, and had the resources to, combat like our intelligence failure. So it was at that point that this decision was made. And there was also a lot of unrest that was happening around India, and we needed like immediate kind of intelligence gathering on West Pakistan, East Pakistan, all of this. So that's how,
rather than depending on foreign agencies.
Yeah.
So, everybody talks about the fact, that Kao Saab was the first R&AW chief. You had Indira Gandhi, who took the massive decision and decided to form the R&AW. But one person who often gets ignored in all the tales and all is this gentleman called P.N. Husker. He was, if I'm not mistaken, he was the principal advisor to Indira Gandhi. He had a role to play in the creation of the R&AW. If you could just tell our viewers, what role did he actually play? How helpful was his inputs to Kao Saab?
So I think Indira Gandhi has often called him her guiding light as well. So when she came to power, there was already, as we know, a lot of internal, politics that were happening within the party. Yeah. And at that point, she took such a big decision of having an external intelligence gathering agency. And it was almost like a lot of our research also tells us that it was like a bitter feud within the family because they were splitting apart. But in all of these things, it was P.N. Husker who said that, I will take care of this. He made sure that like a friendly kind of partition happened between the agencies. He helped Kausab navigate through all the bureaucratic process. And he kind of gave the confidence to everybody that, this is what the country needs at this time, because he was a much senior advisor and he had been at this for a long time. So I think it was almost like he was assuring Indira Gandhi that, this is kind of the best move to do right now.
Also, at the same time, IB, the chief of IB was the director. Only a director he was. When
I was coming to that. Yeah.
He was the chief of IB was only director, but with Mr. Huxer's involvement, he made the chief of research analysis wing, newly formed agency, a secretary under the PM department. And which made the decisions much faster, which made leadership much more clearer. Who's taking decision, who's making those calls, taking those calls.
That is because the secretary is an official rank in the bureaucracy. The secretary is the topmost officer. So when this new DMA, that is the Department of Military Affairs, has been created, so General Rawat actually has two designations, one as the Chief of Defense Staff, and then second designation is Secretary DMA. So he dons two particular ranks. And the secretary, so this was actually Husker's plan that the R&AW chief would be designated as a secretary, which would give him extra powers. So, Indira Gandhi wanted a different set kind of an intelligence organization. And, Kausab was entrusted with this humongous duty. The first person that he actually selected was an officer called Sankaran Nair, and he was from the IB. Everybody else actually came in from the IB. Some came in from the military. But then, how you wanted something different from the IB, but you recruited men from the IB. How did this work? What was Kausab's justification when actually Indira Gandhi asked him about that?
So when Kausab was setting up the Ghanaian Secret Service Agency, he helped set that agency for a year. And when he left from there, Mr. Nair was the person who actually headed there, and he handled the agency after him. And when Kausab was setting up the agency in 1968, he wanted somebody like really trusted, who is almost antithesis to him. As you see, Mr. Cow is very soft demeanor. He does not raise his voice. He is very always like impeccably dressed, has certain certain demeanor.
Suit that he used to wear.
Very classy and soft, that kind of person. He wanted somebody who's like actually opposite to him. And Nair came in that form. He is he's always up for the job. He's like go-getter, and he never shied away from calling a spade a spade. Where Kausab would somewhere manipulate people into believing like what he believes. Nair was go-getter. He says, I want this, I'll get it done. And he wanted somebody like that. And when he needed to set up that agency, he knew that he need those powers, yin and yang. So Nair became yan for his yin. And that is how they bonded.
Also, Mr. Nair had a lot of experience on the field. So while Mr. Cow would operate in the shadows, Mr. Nair would also do a lot of field operations, and he was very well known to, strategically cultivate and place molds. So that was also one of the major strengths that Mr. Cow wanted in his in the new department, and of course, like his second in command, who he could implicitly trust. So I think that's how Mr. Nair came to be a part of RAW.
One interesting aspect of Nair sir, which actually attracted Kausab, was the fact that he was part of a committee which actually went into the loopholes or the issues that were there with in the 1965, and he actually came out with a report criticizing, in hard words, where the IB fell short, right?
Yes. And it's like, this is where India needs to improve. It was as coarsely worded as that.
Yeah, and they were not very very hard core worded report about the failures of the intelligence.
You mentioned about the fact that Nair sir excelled in cultivating molds and placing molds. Viewers, this book mentions about India's one of the finest operations under which India sent in multiple molds into Pakistan, and these molds were able to reach at such high level places. Of course, this book doesn't talk about where exactly the molds were placed, but the fact is that I can tell you that India at one point of time, and I actually managed to tap the phone of the then dictator also in Pakistan when the 1971 war was on.
Yes.
The Indian mold system was fine. And I think, one of the initial person to actually become a mold for us is a character called Kashmir Bedi. So who is Kashmir Bedi?
So, I mean, we can't, of course, reveal the identity of Kashmir Bedi. I mean, for us, Kashmir Bedi is a character who's an amalgamation of a lot of different people who were recruited. And at that point, they would typically look for people who spoke Punjabi, who could, go into West Pakistan, who could, like the borders were a little more porous than what it is now, who could easily be smuggled into it, and who could, at the end of it, make it like a believable thing that they're from Pakistan. So he's one of those characters that is like an amalgamation of many people that Raw had recruited, trained, taught them photography, taught them survival skills, and still maintained a wall between them and the higher officers, so that even if at all at any point they were compromised, it would never lead back to where they were coming from and the spy game.
Of course, Kawasa focused on the fact that you need to have moles on the ground. You need to have agents on the ground at multiple places to give intelligence. I think another big factor that he focused, something which is now spoken about in the current context, is psyops. He had thought and he had emphasized on the importance of psyops way back in the 1970s itself, viewers, when the RAW was formed in 68. And I still remember when the Balakot strike happened. When the ISPR came out with a narrative, I remember writing an article for ThePrint in which I had mentioned how important psyops was, and we lagged in that particular sphere. And I still feel that we continue to lag. But psyops was something that the RAW founder had thought about way back then. Before we go on to other things, one curious thing is with the RAW was the fact that RAW was something in which both the CIA and the KGB also helped us.
Yes.
So what was the role of the CIA, the KGB, as well as the Israeli agencies in setting up of the R&AW?
So when during the Mr. Kaur's career is pretty long. So when in mid 50s he was investigating the case of Kashmir Princess, the crash of Kashmir Princess. He came in touch with MI6, which is the British intelligence agency. During the 1964, after China had exploded a nuclear bomb, CIA wanted to set up a nuclear monitoring facility on the top of Nanda Devi. Then CIA got in touch with India, and that time India and America, they had China in target. So that is how they came together. And similarly, when Kaur was setting up this Ghanaian Secret Service agency, he came in touch with Mossad, and that is how he made contacts with these people. So when he was setting up those agencies, and he had made great friends with those people, French Service Secret Agency also. So when he was setting up those agency when he was setting up RAW in 68, he contacted those people, and they KGB supplied them with arms. Mossad supplied them with training, secret service training, and MI6 was also instrumental in giving them various inputs and how to train spies and how to insert them into foreign lands.
So no matter what are the political leanings were of that time, I think it was quite a coup that he managed to get all of these cuts.
Managed to get everybody into it.
managed to get everything.
I also remember that it was the CIA which actually trained the SFF, the Special Frontier
Yes.
Force. Now, many people are aware that SFF was part of the operation that was undertaken by the Indian Army on the intervening night of 29th and 30th August on the southern banks of Pangong. So this SFF was actually created way back then, and it was trained by the CIA then.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
When the 1971 war happened, the India had started getting feelers that Pakistan was planning something big, and that the US and Pakistan relationship had started to, deepen.
Yeah.
And I think it was one of the field agent of the RAW who actually sent in an input saying that an American plane has landed with arms on board. Is that how it happened?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So when 1965 war happened between India and Pakistan, post that America was during that war, America was supplying arms to both the countries, India and Pakistan, at the same time. But post the war, India had pressurized or somehow convinced America not to supply arms to Pakistan. But US in turn decided not to supply arms to any of those guys. But when in 1968 Nixon came into power, him and Yahya Khan were great friends. And one of those Kashmir Singh operatives, they were going inside Pakistan, and then they were clicking those photographs. They did not know how to interpret them. So there was also an agency called Aviation Research Wing, Aviation Center. They were clicking photographs of like really sorts of land, which is when the plane is flying inside, some 20 kilometers inside Indian airspace, they can actually click photographs across, say, 70 kilometers inside Pakistan's landscape. And
I think just to add, so right now technology has advanced so much that we had we have machines and we have other softwares scanning through photographs. At that point, we would have like countless photographs, and there was only human intelligence that had to go through each photograph to see if there was any change in landscape, if there was anything that could cause an alarm. So it was a combination of these things where Nixon made his hatred towards Indira Gandhi also very apparent. He didn't hide it, and he needed Yahya Khan's help because he wanted someone to help US and Chinese relations, and Yahya Khan was that person. So since they were favoring Pakistan, they broke the arms embargo and started giving warfare to them. And it was through a chance, spying and photography thing, and through some human intelligence that we could find out that this has been breached. And it then led to the conclusion that if such a big breach has happened, it's possibly going to lead to something much bigger. And that's how they started preparing for the war.
Because when the photograph came along, they were actually supplying armed personal carriers, fighter aircraft. They were also supplying tanks and guns, and those all came into the picture. And then the revolution.
Of course, this book gets talk into the details of what happened in the 1971 war. If you could just summarize for our viewers, what was the role played by the RAW in the 1971 war?
So, I'll very famously, we all know when General Sam Manekshaw told Indira Gandhi that I need 6 months to prepare for the war because monsoon is about to come.
Sorry, if I can just jump in. Yeah. So when all of these things happened, we came to know that there was like warfare being supplied. They still didn't know what's going to happen. But then I think one of the most atrocious events in history, Operation Searchlight, started on March 26th, in fact, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was the signal that war is coming. And so West Pakistan had declared war on East Pakistan. India had to take a position. And India had made her position pretty clear on where we're going to be as a country. But we were in March, and at that time is when Sam Manekshaw said we cannot repeat our mistakes that happened in our previous wars. We cannot go into this unprepared. And monsoon is coming. So if we go into this unprepared and if we get stuck in the monsoon, we are not going to win this war. So he said, I need at least 6 months to train my men. And that's when Raw came in, and Mr. Cow said, "Okay, you need those 6 months. I will give you those 6 months." And it started this big, like almost like a big orchestration of intelligence, psyops, intelligence gathering, and the amount of things that they have done to give those 6 months for the army to prepare, including and also one of the big things they did was the formation of the Mukti Bahini.
Yeah.
So, which is like guerrilla warfare. So they kept attacking Pakistan through intelligence and through guerrilla warfare, while the army prepared for the larger picture.
And that is that resulted in that army actually very swiftly finishing the war within 13 days. Otherwise, it could have been drawn off if the ground was not prepared. Maybe.
True. And you since you mentioned about the war, the Pakistanis had appointed General Tika Khan, and he famously said, and he told his soldiers when he went into East Pakistan, that I want the land and not the people.
Yes.
The Pakistanis unleashed in East Pakistan was the worst kind of genocide. Genocides are actually worse. This is a wrong usage I'm using. Worst kind of genocide. But the fact is that there were thousands and lakhs of people who were killed, who were shot, women were raped, children were killed as part of the larger plan by Pakistan to gain control over East Pakistan. And, there was, of course, a fear that, the world will think of India as the aggressor. So India made sure that, it didn't really, while it continued to operate clandestinely in East Pakistan, it created Mukti Bahini, trained them, but it never really armed them. The arms for the Mukti Bahini actually came in from Israel, right? Yeah. How did that happen? What was Kao sir's thought process then?
So I think firstly they created the RAW created the Mukti Bahini, and it was supposed to, because so to track back a little bit, what happened was once the genocide happened, people started fleeing East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, and start coming to India. And then it was like an overwhelming exodus into the country. We were still, still a young country ourselves, and it was getting very difficult to manage the resources for this. And so it was using the patriotism of a lot of the fleeing people from East Pakistan that the Mukti Bahini was created. Like the Indian Army decided to train them and send them back in because they were the best people to fight their own country. But we didn't have the resources to feed them, let alone arm them. And and how do we reach out to which country do we ask help from now? And it had to also be like a secret operation. We couldn't be seen as the aggressor. So that's when they reached out to Israel, because the Israel Prime Minister then had come out in support of Indira Gandhi. She was one of the few women premiers at that time, and she had spoken very highly of Indira Gandhi, and Mr. Huxer had access to her. So it was like, it became this whole chain, and that's how we got arms from Israel, which then went to the Mukti Bahini, which then helped them fight the guerrilla warfare.
Again, when it comes to intelligence gathering, I think when Pakistan launched the attack in December, when their fighter aircraft bombed multiple airfields, and which led to the war. The fact is that the Indians were already aware that the Pakistanis are going to launch this.
Yes.
And also, when the naval attack on the Karachi harbor happened, the Navy also had precise information of the capabilities and of what the Pakistanis were having and where those systems were located. How did the RAW manage to get that? Because it's an interesting story if you could tell for our viewers. Just a bit of it. The viewers should read this book to get the entire details of it.
Yeah. So as the Pakistan's preemptive strike on the night of 3rd of December was called Operation Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
And they thought they had this upper hand if Pakistan attacks first, and they will have the first,
the surprise element would be with them.
They will have the surprise element, and before India could react, they can actually overwhelm India.
Yeah.
But they did not know that RAW itself was a preemptive strike that India did almost 3 years back. Because India has been preparing for this day for a really long time. For years, they have been preparing for this day. So that is actually where the role of RAW comes in. And that is where precise their entire thing was when General Manikson needed 6 months. 6 months went into preparing those guerrilla warfare in Bangladesh, but actually also it also went into gathering that intelligence, that how and when the this thing will come in, when the attack will.
Yeah, so they had a mole placed in such high level position that they got the intelligence that on this particular date this attack is going to happen.
Yeah.
Of course, it's a more elaborative process. The readers,
Yeah.
you can read the book, but so it was so precise that they knew exactly on this date this is going to happen, and there was no casualty when the flights bombed us on the western frontier, because Pakistan hoped that they would bomb us at the western frontier and then start the war on the east. But everything was so well planned, and it was like the knowledge was so much in our control that I think we defeated Pakistan in their game much before it had already begun. And of course, like similarly with the Karachi harbor also, there was a mission where 2 RAW agents undertook, and they got very detailed photographs of the harbor, and that's how we Indians knew what ships were anchored at what harbor and how they planned for the attack at the Karachi harbor.
See, intelligence, prior knowledge, prior information is something which is very key. And, sadly, since then, after the 1971 war, we've actually had a lot of intelligence failure. The fact is that when the Kargil happened, there was, of course, we didn't have knowledge. When the 26/11 happened, there was again an intelligence failure. When the Uri strike, when the Uri attack happened, when the terrorists sneaked in attack, there was information intelligence failure. And of course, even now, when China came in first, the agencies were literally caught napping. There was lack of coordination between them. So, now that you've researched so much, do you feel that you need officers like like Kawasab? You need officers, other officers with Kawasab like MBK Nair, the Hussain Wala, as well as Sankaran Nair and Banerjee sir. Do you need? It's important for agencies to have such officers who can speak their mind, without fear of what the political establishment would say or think.
I mean, very honestly, we're not authorized to say much about this. But of course, if we do need these officers. But I feel like we have those officers, but maybe what Mr. Cow had that was unique to him was that vision. Like I feel like any officer with like a long-term vision to be able to see so much into the future is what a good intelligence officer embodies. And the more we research for this book, I feel that's what we found. Like even in 1968, they could kind of predict like something big is going to happen some 2 years down the line, and they prepared for it. It's that kind, and without having the resources that we have today. So I'm sure like intelligence is a very complex game with, we've advanced in technology so much, and it involves like human intelligence and machines and so many other things, and the politics of the country. But I guess the vision that Mr. Cow had has been so unique. And even that's why even 50 years from the war, he's still spoken about, the intelligence gathering is still given as an example, which is what makes him stand apart from everybody else.
Absolutely, there is no doubt about that. Thank you so much for speaking to ThePrint and writing this particular book. Viewers, I must say again, this book is actually just about, not actually 250 pages. This book is actually just about 235 pages. But the book is interesting. This book is thrilling because it talks about various aspects of the 1971 war, as well as how the R&AW, that is the research analysis, came into being, and the kind of operations that the R&AW conducted, and the psyops that the R&AW conducted which actually forced Pakistan to launch the air operations that gave India the opportunity to strike back and actually get into the whole situation completely and in public. Thank you so much and best of luck for this book.
Thank you so much.
Thank
It
you
was
so
a
much
lot of
for
fun
having us
chatting.
here.
Thank you.
Thank you.